Right now, a lot of people are convinced that a market crash is coming. Oil prices are back on the up, and huge companies like IBM have just had their worst trading day since 1961. Analysts are calling this the most stretched market since the dot-com bubble. So my question to you is, what would you do if the market crashed tomorrow? Do you have a plan? If so, is it optimal? Would you stick to it? Well, by the end of this video, I'm going to give you all the information you need so that you're not fearing a market crash and you're ready to sit comfortably inside the chaos. First, let's get one thing straight. A crash isn't rare. It isn't even that unusual. The market has corrected, which most define as a drop of 10% or more, dozens of times in the last century. It's not a one-off event or something in isolation. Think of it more as a toll you pay for being invested. Most people panic because they think that a market crash means that something's wrong, that all of a sudden companies are no longer valuable. It doesn't. But it does mean that the plan you have in place needs to be strong enough to endure these times and not break. So what do these actual plans look like? Well, let me run you through some of the options. Option 1, pound cost averaging. This one's pretty basic and I'm sure most of you watching this video will know what it is, but let me just give you a quick rundown. You invest the exact same amount every day, every week or every month without fail, no matter what the market's doing. It's a boring default, but it works simply because it takes the decision making completely out of the equation. Option 2, lump sum investing. This is what I do personally, and it's when you invest all your available funds all at once so you're fully exposed. No cash waiting on the sidelines. Historically, lump sum investing beats drip feeding about 2/3 of the time, simply because markets go up more often than they go down. But it certainly takes a stronger stomach simply because all of your funds are exposed to volatility right from the jump. If the market drops just after you put 1, 5 or 10 grand in, you certainly feel it. Option 3, and this is what I want to spend the most time on, is a hybrid approach. Let's go through an example with this one and I'll show you how the split approach works. Say you had £500 a month to invest. £300 you dollar cost average or pound cost average into the market regardless of the conditions or what your thoughts and feelings are. The remaining 200 you set aside, preferably in a high interest account, and you keep it there as dry powder. Then when the market drops at 5, 10 or 15%, whatever your individual threshold is, you deploy that dry powder so you're buying at a lower price point. It sounds great on paper, but what this style of investing does is that it introduces an element of trying to time the market and a lot more psychology, which some people just don't want to deal with. And for example, if the markets just continue to climb and you don't get that dip, that's £200 a month that's just sitting there on the sidelines, not taking part in that growth. That's a real cost, and while this approach can be effective and it's a lot more engaging, it's certainly not foolproof and there are definitely some cons. One thing I know that some people do to try and take the timing element out of it is that they split their reserve portion into certain trenches or sections. For example, if the market drops 5%, then a third gets put in. If it drops another 5%, so 10% in total, a second third gets in, and if the market drops 15%, then the full amount gets put in the market. There are more slightly advanced methods, such as value averaging, which is basically investing more when your portfolio is slightly underperforming and slightly less when it's overperforming. And rebalancing strategies, where you stick to specific portions or barriers that you set out. These certainly work, but in my opinion, they're not really necessary for most people. Now we have some strategies outlined. The real question is, do they actually work? In order to determine that, we need to look back at some previous crashes and see how they played out. A great place to start, simply because I'm sure we all remember it well, is the pandemic in 2020. It was a crazy time where it felt like the entire world was locked down all at once. Flights grounded, offices closed, and nobody was allowed outside except for the essentials. Taking a look at markets, The S&P fell almost 34% in about a month, the fastest crash of that size in the market's history. And if you think about it, the fear was rational. Nobody really knew how long the lockdown would last, and some even doubted if we'd return to how things were before. So much so that trading was halted multiple times that March because the drops were so fast. What actually turned it round was intervention. The Federal Reserve cut interest rates to near zero, buying up government bonds and assets, essentially flooding the system with support it desperately needed. And due to this, the index was back to its old high by August that same year. Under 6 months, from a once-in-a-century global shutdown to near all-time highs. Okay, thankfully, a once-in-a-lifetime global pandemic doesn't happen very often. So let's look at something that's ever-present, something that's all around us. And that is politics. 2025 saw tariff headlines re-emerge in April. This one was self-inflicted in a sense, not a global disaster that we couldn't predict. This one was drawn up in policy. Sweeping tariffs on nearly every trading partner all at once, dropped with almost no warning. Over the following week, the S&P lost more than 12%, one of the worst two-day stretches for the index since World War II. The fear here was completely different to 2020. This wasn't about will the world return to normal. This was something man-made, a policy, recession fears. People were genuinely thinking, is the US still a safe place to store your money? But because this was a policy decision, it could indeed be reversed by a policy decision. And as tariff proposals were rolled back in, confidence returned to the markets. The market recovered in 32 days, 1 month from start to finish. So you can see here, two completely different causes, a pandemic and a policy decision, but the same outcome. Having looked at the data, what I take from this is that fear-driven crashes tend to resolve themselves faster, because once the uncertainty lifts, so does the market. But what if the crash isn't driven by fear and doesn't recover quickly? And that brings us to 2008. This one built slowly over time, but then fell apart all at once. Years of risky mortgage lending built up a huge amount of bad debt within the banking system. In September that year, the Lehman Brothers, one of the biggest investment banks in the world, collapsed, the largest bankruptcy in US history. That wasn't a scare, that was an actual institution failing in real time, and people knew that others would follow. The talk at the time wasn't, will this recover? It was more, is the entire banking system about to collapse? And that fear was proportionate. The S&P lost 57% from peak to trough, more than half its value. Now, unlike the previous two crashes we looked at, what turned this around wasn't a single moment, it was a slow rebuild. The Fed slashed rates and pumped money into the system. The Treasury forced banks to open their books through stress tests so everyone could finally see just how bad things really were. But once that transparency landed, confidence slowly started to return because people weren't guessing anymore. Even so, the S&P didn't reclaim its old high until March 2013, 5.5 years later. So here's my personal take on things. Recoveries happen, but how fast they happen depends on what caused the crash in the first place. Fear can resolve itself in weeks or months, once that uncertainty lifts and there's no longer any reason to be fearful. But when structural damage is present, like broken institutions, it can take a lot longer to repair. But at the time of recording this video anyway, every single crash has indeed recovered. So with all of that being said, how does this actually look like for me personally? Well, I'm still in my accumulation period, meaning that I'm still shoveling money into the market with the hope of it growing. My personal investing strategy is quite aggressive, but of course that's down to the individual. I believe I have quite a high risk tolerance and I'm prepared to take on that additional risk at the hope of greater rewards. The strategy I use is lump sum investing, in that I've moved all of my savings into my investment portfolio and then I invest every month a set amount. And hopefully that will serve me well in the coming 5, 10, 15, 20 years. What's really important and almost the point of this video is the mindset. At this stage of my investment journey, I really don't mind a market crash. It's definitely a psychological shift, but at the moment, I see a market crash as a great opportunity to just buy cheaper shares. And then one day in the distant future, I'll look back at this period and I'll be glad I've done so. Now, of course, my aggressive approach certainly isn't for everyone. None of this is financial advice, and if you need any guidance, please speak to a professional. Before you go, let me know in the comments what your personal investing strategy is if and when the market crashes. And if you're interested in why my investing strategy is so aggressive, then check out this video where I break down my whole portfolio. And on that note, guys, I'll catch you in the next one.